Hi guys, my name is Connor Lynn, and today I'm going to be performing a technology demonstration for this week. And for this week, we're going to be doing a formative assessment. And just to reiterate, a formative assessment is a assessment for learning in the classroom in which data of students' learning is permanently recorded. So typically, they are low stake assignments that are not really graded, and it's meant for the teacher to be able to tangibly get results to see what is working in the classroom, what's not, and if a certain topic in the lesson needs to be repeated, or if students need more time to understand certain content matters. So for this week's demonstration, we were given a scenario in which we have a teacher by the name of Mrs. Smith, where she has 20 students in the classroom, and she's an English teacher at the fifth grade level. And for this particular week, she is going over synonyms and antonyms. And so for Mrs. Smith, she gets her students for 1 hour blocks 5 times a week. So give or take, that's a fair amount of time, but also at the same time, it's not, since you're only getting them 5 hours a week to teach, this certain content. And she already knows what lessons she wants to do, and she also knows that she wants to kind of do it like a building, reinforce each lesson off of the other, and really reinforcing those ideas and such. And at the end of each class period, she is using exit slips as a means of having formative assessments for the students, to where she can fully understand at the end of the day if students are understanding what they're being taught or if they're not. And she wants to be able to give students the opportunity to give feedback and to just let her know what's working, what's not, and if they need certain instruction the following day or if they need more help. So, what are our goals for this assessment that Mrs. Smith has? So, she wants to read students' responses and base that on creating the following day's lesson plan. That's drawing back to the previous slide where it's kind of like a building. She's reinforcing these ideas and the content to students so that they're fully understanding. And she wants to be able to create a report on tracking growth in students' learning and progress. So, for this formative assessment, she wants to be able to essentially take every student's answer to see if they're incorrect or correct, and be able to see over time if they are gradually understanding or if they are growing. And if they are, then she knows for future reference that that method of learning is working for the students. Whereas if most students or a particular student is not getting answers correct or is not understanding, then she knows she could reevaluate some things that she's doing with the assessment and kind of just gear or change it a little bit. Or even give more time to students, spend another day on a certain topic, etc. And she wants to be able to give feedback to students. So if a student is getting answers correct consistently, give positive feedback. Or even if students are getting answers really incorrectly, or they're taking lengthy amount of times to be able to answer questions within a class period, she can give some constructive feedback to be able to more efficiently create a better learning environment, etc. So, what are some challenges that Mrs. Smith has for this? So, by standard, this isn't really restricted to this example, but students typically of all age groups really don't usually write much for giving answers. So whenever it comes to exit slips, a lot of students are not going to give, a big itemized list or detailed list of what went right, what went wrong, or even what they're understanding and what they're not. Typically, students like to have tangible things in front of them in regards to what is being taught, rather than being able off the top of their head, especially at the end of a class period where they're tired and they're ready to go, to be able to give any kind of feedback or demonstration of what they're learning and what they're not. And the other challenge is logistically, it's difficult to keep track with each individual student. So whenever you have 20 students in the class, or even if you have multiple classes, that's 20 pieces of paper that for just 1 week, or I mean 1 day, that Mrs. Smith needs to keep track of. She needs the file, and she needs to be able to individually, flip through each student. And so naturally, that is just logistically, it's a nightmare, especially if she has multiple classes. At the fifth grade level, probably not, but as you go up the ladder, it can get really problematic. And then also, it's difficult to get student feedback after each lesson. So that really ties back to the first point of students typically at the end of a class period they're tired, they're ready to go, and they are probably not going to think of really constructive feedback, at least a lengthy one, in which would be productive to Mrs. Smith. So her fifth grade students are probably not going to, write an essay on, what's going right, what's going wrong. And, on Mrs. Smith's end, it kind of ties back into the second point. Also, logistically, whenever you have all these pieces of paper, it's going to be very difficult to track down each student, and creating your own chart to see growth or what's going wrong, to be able to track down each student and really just be able to give that feedback. It's just very difficult to do, and it's also not time efficient at all. It's very, you only get them for 1 hour each day, and it's just not very productive at all. And so naturally, we're going to have to find different alternatives for Mrs. Smith to use in her classroom. So the educational technology that I would like to use for this formative assessment is Kahoot. So Kahoot is an educational technology that mainly uses user-generated multiple choice questions. So, for example, let's take a multiple choice quiz for synonyms and antonyms. An instructor can create a multiple choice quiz in which students will answer questions based on what the teacher is creating. And I'll go a little bit more into it in the demonstration of how Kahoot exactly works. But essentially, that's the bare minimum definition of what Kahoot is. So the other point is the user or the teacher is given complete control over the creation of quizzes in terms of how much time each question is, how many points they are, um, images, placement of answers, multiple answers, etc., and what the correct answer is, what's not correct. And what is really nice about Kahoot is it allows the user to see individual answers of every student, general scores, and also progress over time, which all three of those things, that's really what we're looking for in addressing some of the challenges that Mrs. Smith is facing in her classroom. So why Kahoot? So Kahoot in general, it's used variably and generally around the elementary, high school, and even collegiate level. It's very flexible and convenient, and it goes into the updated matter of today's age of most students, most kids have either a phone or a laptop, which is really what makes Kahoot very convenient for teachers, is that most students are having those technology devices. You can just whip it out at the end of a class period, and it can take however long the teacher wants to complete a Kahoot, because you can design and control how long each question is, whether that's 10 seconds, 30, 40, a minute, minutes, etc. It's all, and so that goes into the second point of is expedited. It can be completed promptly, and it can really save class time, which also addresses one of the challenges that Mrs. Smith was facing in the matter of finding the time to give that feedback to students in a timely manner, and just finding time, because teachers nowadays, and really the biggest struggle that teachers have really always faced, is finding time to deliver content to students and to be able to give that constructive criticism. Then the third point, obviously, is that it's appealing to most students, simply because it appeals to the nature of a introverted versus an extroverted student. It doesn't put a particular student on the spot to demonstrate their, knowledge of the content. and it allows some sort of comfort. And it also goes into the technology aspect. A lot of kids nowadays, they prefer to be on their phones and their laptops, and so it kind of takes learning into a technology side of things, and so it works for the teacher, and it definitely works for the students, and so it does mesh well. So for this demonstration, I'm really going to go into not a really lengthy itinerary of exactly what students will be learning, but for this demonstration, I created a Kahoot that's based on the L4.5.C, which is a part of the Department of Education for the state of Illinois' literacy requirements to demonstrate understanding of words by relating them to their opposites and to the words similar but not identical meanings, antonyms versus synonyms. And so for this demonstration, it's going to be as if Mrs. Smith is teaching students antonyms versus synonyms day one. So it's not going to be too complicated. It's just going to be a few questions, and I'm just going to try to show you what this would look like in the classroom at the end of a class period on the first day. So let me stop that. Let me go over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Google, and I'm just going to type in Kahoot, and we're going to go to this first link right here. Okay, and then it's going to ask me to log in, and you can just create an account. Kahoot is so there's two versions of it. One is in which students can mainly use, and then the other teachers can use, but really it has the same function either way. If teachers use it, they can use a paid version of it in which they can get a multitude of different games and questions that students would be able to use. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to use the free version. And really, whenever it comes to something as simplistic as synonyms and antonyms, you really can just use the base version. As you get more complex into the literacy requirements for English, it might be necessary for Mrs. Smith or other teachers to consider paid versions of the service. So I'm going to log in right here. Log in right there. It'll let me in. Okay. So it's kind of there's a lot of things happening over here, but let's take it one step at a time. So like I said before, it's a paid service as well, but it's mainly free. So you can choose to upgrade, and if you get any notifications, you'll find that over here. And what we're going to focus on strictly for this demonstration are the home function, reports, and then library. So home is going to take you over here. And let's go to library. Okay. So right now I have two Kahoots on my account. One is from I work for the International Affairs Office at SIUE, and for our orientation, I made a Kahoot for students to use. And I'm going to show you for a couple minutes this particular Kahoot because students did use it and they gave answers, and I'm going to use that to kind of show certain reports. Granted, this was not for a grade. It wasn't for any academic assignment. It was just for fun. And the second one is going to be a little quick demonstration that I created for the sake of this assignment. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click on Summer 22 Orientation, and then this is going to give me the opportunity to kind of show how Kahoot really works. So let's go here. So these are different questions for this particular Kahoot, and as you can see, each question is 60 seconds. What that means is whenever the game starts, students on their phones or laptop or whichever device they're using, they have 60 seconds to answer the question. Now, if the entire class already answers the question, the game will move on so that, we're not waiting, however long to move forward, essentially. So let's just click on one of the questions. Who is the current governor of Illinois? It is J.B. Pritzker. And then these are just different options or different answers. They're not correct, but they're just different options to kind of more or less challenge a student, and they can be as difficult or as easy as the teacher wants. So each shape is, again, attributed to a certain answer, and the teacher will decide what is correct and what's not. So for the sake of this, we're going to go to Edit Kahoot. And this is, let's do another question. Who's the current president of the United States? So teachers have the option to switch out the images that students will see whenever the question pops up. So while for synonyms and antonyms, that could be something, like a spicy food with a, hot sauce and peppers. You can put that, the teacher can put an image of that together and put that on the Kahoot. And so just to give students a feeling or even a hint of what is, what they're learning. And so teachers can edit the answers. So James Monroe, Joe Biden, George Bush, Al Gore, etc. And so let's go over here. And this is really where the paid version of Kahoot comes into play. So for the free version, teachers or students will only have access to the quiz function or true or false. But if you do a paid, there also are puzzles, typed answers, sliders, etc. So, and then for the time limit, you can edit how long the students will get for each question. And then for points, so Kahoot will use a point function in order to track a winner, essentially, for the day. And I think this definitely can be appealing to a lot of students because it is a game, it is competitive, and students will get a certain amount of points based on how fast they're answering the questions. And at the end of the game, there's a winner, I think, first, second, third place. And so it can definitely be a motivator for students to be able, who wants to win. And, at the end of the game, Mrs. Smith could give, some candy or whatever prize to the winner, or even extra credit. I've seen that done in the past as well. And then also the last function is the answer options. There's the multi-select one, but that's paid. If a teacher wants multiple answers to a question, they will just click on, you decide what is correct. So in this case, if I chose George Bush as the correct answer and Joe Biden, they both work. So, and also, if you want questions in a certain order, you just have to drag them, whichever one you want. And then it's really easy to kind of just go down the list and what order questions you want. And also, if you want the same template for a question, you just click duplicate, or if you want to delete a question, just delete it. And you can edit themes, and then you can also preview it. But we're not going to do that. We're going to go back. Yeah, let me move my camera over here. Okay, so, and then we're going to go to the demonstration that I created. Okay. So as we can see, I just have 4 simple questions. For the sake of a class period, it'd probably be prevalent to have maybe 10 as an exit slip, just so Mrs. Smith will be able to get a better idea. So we have some questions, what is an antonym? What is a synonym? Which of the following word combinations is an example of an antonym? And then for a synonym as well. So for the sake of this, I'm going to click on the practice function, and what that does is click on it. Okay. Right. So for a student, or for the teacher, in fact, whenever the game is started, it's going to look like this. And at the top here, it'll have a code that students will input into their phone or laptop whenever they put Kahoot.it in. And that code will be at the top screen where my cursor is. And the students here, these are just AI, but whenever students come in, they will get this on their phone or laptop. It'll say join the game, then you enter your nickname. My nickname will be Connor. Some students will pick something funny, something random. Usually teachers will have students just put their actual name just for the sake of keeping track of them. So usually if a student signs in, the game doesn't start automatically, but because this is a practice, it'll start because these are just AI students. So we'll click OK Go. There's my name right there. So the game has started. There's the title of the demonstration. Starts. Okay, what is an antonym? That is the question. The student gets to read it. So what? And you get 30 seconds on the clock. An antonym is obviously a word opposite in meaning to another, so we'll just click on that. So you see I got 859 points. That's based on how fast it took me to answer the question. And the reason why they do this is because obviously most students are going to get the question correct, and so they have to base it on, how fast students are getting it. Let's go next. There's a scoreboard. Again, these are AI. So let's go next. Quiz, what is a synonym? Obviously, questions in similar meaning to another. Okay, I think there was a mistake on my end. Whenever I created this, I didn't mean to put this as a correct answer. Okay. 3 to 4, which of the following combinations is an example of an antonym? So it's going to be hot and cold. Okay, which of the following combinations is an example of a synonym? It's going to be sweet and honeyed, or spicy and hot as well. You can have multiple answers. And so at the end of the Kahoot, this is what it would look like for a student. This is AI, second, third, and first place. Okay. So we're going to exit that. And the other function, the last function that I would like to show you is the reports. So because no actual person has taken my demonstration for this assessment, I'm going to use the summer 2022 orientation assessment that I created, since actual people did use that. So we're going to open it right here. It'll load. Okay. So this is what a instructor would see whenever they are using Kahoot and they're looking at reports for their particular Kahoot that they created. So as we can see on this particular day, we had 31 students play it. And keep in mind, these were international students, so a lot of them did not get the answers correct. They were from hundreds of countries. For this Kahoot, there were 57 questions, and in total, it took about 16 minutes to get through them. It was very expedited, etc. So for this function, Kahoot provides a need help section in which it'll give a list of students, in this case 27, that need help on the content and then didn't finish. These are the students that did not finish a lot of the questions. So using these functions, it's very good for the instructor to be able to see this, especially Mrs. Smith. So yeah, so we're going to go to the need help section. And this here is going to give a defined list of all the students who took the Kahoot. So And in this case, these are the students that and so we're going to go to the questions tab here. This will list every question that was in the Kahoot. So, for example, who's current president of the United States, etc. And we're going to see an incorrect and the correct percentage of what students are getting. And then, as you can see, they are very variable. And they'll have the question type and the actual question itself. So, if we click on a question, we're going to get the, let me move my camera thing. We're going to get the different answers that we got from in response to students. So, for example, Joe Biden got 27 for this question, George Bush got 1, and then no answer. 3 people did not answer the question. So, and as we can see, we have a points tab time, and if they got it correct or not, and we can see what their answer was, and we can see the points to see what students are entering them really fast and who are not. And then this is the average for the Kahoot as a whole. It took the average student 8.76 seconds to answer the question. And so if we go to the difficult questions, what that means is most of these students did not get the questions correct. And as we can see at the end of here, I can see the names of each student of what they are getting and what they're not getting. And that's definitely that's very key in terms of answering some of the challenges for Mrs. Smith in her class. And then the feedback section. At the end of a Kahoot game, typically students will have the opportunity to give feedback to the instructor who created the Kahoot. And in this case, no one gave me feedback for my Kahoot, but what that would look like is students can rate the game. They can recommend I believe they would type it on their phone or laptop. They would type some changes that they're suggesting or better ways to learn the content. But as an instructor, you would see that here. Okay, and as a whole, I firmly believe that this Kahoot, or Kahoot in general, really addresses some of the challenges that Mrs. Smith is facing in terms of, the logistics and keeping track and being able to give feedback to students. Really having that ability to see what students are learning and what they're not, what they're getting incorrect, is definitely it's a key factor in addressing some of these educational problems. The biggest thing that I would say that allows the instructor and Mrs. Smith to be able to see this progress is that whenever you go to reports, the report function, you can see every Kahoot that you made. And Mrs. Smith could, if she had multiple classes or if she was teaching different subjects for the class that she has, that will be listed here. And whenever she clicks on let me go back actually to the other one. Whenever she clicks on a Kahoot, she can see every student. And also, it really helps too, because if a student was absent, then she knows that they're absent, and they'll definitely need they'll need extra help whenever it comes to making up that work. But each Kahoot will have every student, and it'll have what they're learning, what they're getting correct, what they're not getting correct, and also tells the amount of time that's taking them to answer a question. So if it's taking a student really quickly to answer a question, they pretty much have it down. They know what they're doing versus, if they're not, or if they're taking a really long time or not even answering the question at all, that tells the teacher, did I phrase this question correctly? Did I not? Is this too difficult? Is it too easy? What are some things I need to change? And that reports function is essential because again, you can see every Kahoot. And Mrs. Smith at the end of each day or week or whatever she's doing, she can go back and see everything. So I think to wrap it up, I think that's going to be it. thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful day.